It's me, Jan McKay from Westville News, coming to speak to you today. Aunt Betty.
I like your hair that way.
Thank you. I thought you'd like this.
Sure.
I know you like long hair and braids.
I think once I had braids years ago.
Oh my God, it's warm in here.
Is it too warm?
Oh no, it's okay.
I just opened that door.
So how you feeling?
Well, I was just giving my brain a workout, working on the word puzzle. I can't pronounce one word, but I can find it in the things here because it's Kabuki Theater.
Kabuki?
Kabuki. I was born on March 14th, 1941. My name is Elizabeth Catherine Stewart, but then they started calling me Betty for short. So I always got Betty. Except one of my school friends always called me Elizabeth, and it sounded nice to hear me being called Elizabeth. My first memory that I can remember, that my mother will never forget, when I was a young girl, Mama used to walk down from Victoria Street to Water Street to visit Aunt Rosalind, Daddy's sister, and she had a family, my cousins, and we used to play and have fun. So then we'd stay a while and come home. So one day, without letting my mother know, I walked down by myself. I was about 5 years old. Yeah, about 5. And Mom was, well, after I found out that she was so worried and not knowing where I was at. And at those days, they didn't have a telephone, so she couldn't call Aunt Rosalind to say, is Betty down there? No. So the part about how she found out I was down there, that's not there. All I know is that I got back home again. But I never did that again without letting her know. But I had so much fun that day that I want to go back and have some fun. So I walked down. It was like a double house. There was a small part and a larger part. When we went there, we lived in the small part. I have a picture of me sitting in a high chair in the doorway, and Aunt Kay is down below, peeking from down below the high chair. She was 10, because she was 10 years older than me. And the bigger end was Dave and Florence Patterson lived in the bigger end, and they had quite a family too. So then after they moved away, Mom and Dad and our family moved into the bigger part, and the smaller part was left vacant until Carol and Joan Smith from West River, that's where Mama was raised, they were going to high school in Westville. So they came and they stayed and rented the smaller part. As long as they were going to school, they were in there, and then they graduated. The kitchen was very small, and there was a table by the window, and then across from the table was the sink, and then you could go upstairs from that end. You opened the door and went upstairs, right from the kitchen, and then you went into the living room. From the living room, there was a bit of a porch that would take you out to the front door, and then upstairs were the bedrooms.
Did you have your own room?
Not with a bunch of kids, we shared. There's 3 or 4 of us together in one bed. At least we kept each other warm. Bathroom. We had a metal bathtub, about 5 feet long, and it was in the bathroom. It was in where the toilet was. Yeah, it fit in there, and that was our bathroom. There was one outside, because later on, Harry and Renee Cunningham lived in the small end after the girls graduated and went back wherever they were going. And there was an outside toilet, and Harry, he used to walk out there in the wintertime in his bare feet to go to the bathroom. Oh yeah, no shoes and none, just coveralls and bare feet, and away he went. And there was a barn on the property where the coal was kept.
Where did you put your clothes and things like that?
What clothes? There must have been a closet. Yeah, it's funny. We had a lot of things, it was given to us, and I remember in the wintertime we wore those long brown stockings with the elastic at top to hold them up. And you'd had to wash them out that night and hang them on a rack behind a stove called the Warm Morning, so they'd be dry in the morning. In my neighborhood growing up, there was a lot of houses, and they were close, and most of them had children, which we would get around with. And then my grandmother, of course, lived only 2 houses from us on the same side. And across the road was Aggie Wallace. She had grandchildren that would come there for their lunch because they lived up in Foxbrook Road, and in the winter they would walk to school, of course. There was no school buses then. And they would take their lunch with them, and at lunchtime they would go to their grandmother's, who was right across the road from where I lived. There was a field right behind the house and a field right above us where we used to go out and pick blueberries because there was a lot of blueberries up there. My father used to love picking blueberries. Mud. The roads certainly weren't paved for a long time. They were mud and muck after a rain. The coal man had a horse, of course. Of course he had a horse. That rhymes. Yeah, Mr. Thompson delivered coal, the coal in the back that he got over at the Drummond Mine. At that time, it was a going concern, the Drummond Mine. It was just off of Victoria Street. Well, there's a lot of people working there. A lot of people had jobs when I was a child. And the ice house was there. There was a big barn. We called it the ice house because they would get ice from the Drummond Pond in the winter, stored in the ice house, put sawdust between the blocks and all that. And then when it was, we had an ice box. It wasn't a refrigerator. It was called an ice box. And the blocks of ice were delivered by Donnie Cameron. The ice kept pretty well in the top part of the ice box to keep things cold down below. We'd go out there when he'd come by with a piece of wax paper, and he would knock off pieces of ice, and we'd wrap it in wax paper, and that was our popsicle. Tommy Kerrigan, down on the corner of South Main Street and Drummond Road, was the store where Mama and Dad got meats. Yeah, and then Tom Foley had a fish market in Westville, so we'd get fish there. I remember one day, Mom sent me downtown to get some fish. And I had on a nice winter coat. I really liked it. I can see it yet. It was black with sort of gray trim on the cuff and the collar. Well, she sent me down to get the fish. And years ago, they wrapped fish or meat in brown paper. And so he wrapped it in brown paper. And when I got home, all the salt from the fish ran down my coat. And when I got home, it had all salt streaks all over my nice coat. It was fishy. I don't know how it dripped out of that bag, but it did, that paper, you know. I remember the man who used to work at Tom Foley's. He always had a cigarette in his mouth hanging down, and the ashes would fall down into the pocket on his apron and keep on going. I don't know how many, to tell you the truth, but Westville was quite populated back then. There was a lot of big families. There was the McCackerns, the Rundles, the Hubleys. Hubleys had about 16. He had the biggest family allowance in Westville. One of the Rundles is my neighbor right now, Jeannie. She's one of 13 children. Oh yeah, they were very productive. My mother's name was Viola. My father's name was David. Nice looking couple. They were a very nice looking couple. My mother was born in outside Halifax, but she was raised in Central West River when she was adopted by a Smith family. And my father was born in the house on Victoria Street. Dad was born on March the 8th, 1915. And Mom was born September the 11th, 1915. There's only about 6 months difference in their ages. She fell in love with Daddy when she was about 14 because he got a job picking apples out at Central West River for Dwight Smith. And at that time she was there. That's where she was raised. She went to a dance one time. She was telling me this. She was sitting beside this man, and my father was there too at the dance, and he might have been dancing with somebody else at the time. You know, you could do that. And she told this man, she said, that's the man I'm going to marry. Right there. And that was Dad. And so she did. I think they did have a good marriage. They raised 9 children. They would have been married 50 years in April the 10th, but Dad died in October, 86 or 87. Well, Dad worked in the mine, as I said. He worked in the mine. Well, Dad was in the services. I forgot about that part. Dad was in the services overseas in different places in Germany, and he would send Mama home checks, money to help with the kids, and then we got family allowance. Way back then, the family allowance was $6. It started out at $6 a month for each child. By that time, we had about 5. Jerry was the baby, and then when Dad came home from overseas, Mom had the last 3 girls. I loved babies, and I used to keep saying to my mother, why can't we have a baby? She said, well, you have to wait till your father comes home. He's overseas. Well, can't we write him a letter and tell him we're going to have a baby? No, dear, it doesn't work that way. When he did come home, she had Isabel. And then she had Rosalind. And then she had Beverly. And I wondered if she was ever going to shut it off. Dad used to always say that he was average. He was average, yeah. Back then, a lot of people were equal. Nobody was really rich, you know. That you know, they never. There was nobody that had a lot more than another person. No, not in Westville. Railway men made more money at that time. And then there was a Crockett family that lived in Victoria Street. That was my first babysitting job, was taking care of their 2 children, and they gave me $5. And boy, that was really good. I loved kittens. I'd take home every stray cat I found. And we did have a dog, which I got for Beverly when she was a baby. I got it when I worked at Mina's Canteen at Blue Acres. At that time, Mina owned a canteen. That was my first job when I was 15. When I was a child, I would eat anything, and my mother could feed 5 out of a can of Campbell's soup. She just kept watering it down. And Heinz spaghetti in a can, got sick of that. Never had a can of that for years. Skipped, played marbles, kicked the can. We used to hide and seek. Yeah. And I used to go up to the woods and pretend that this was my house. There were some trees up there, and I used to pretend that was my house. And I would hang things on the spruce trees, you know. I must have been a good help to Mom, you know, because I would do those things. Yeah. Take them out. Give her a break. Help put them to bed. Well, especially when the last 3 girls came around, I was either wiping asses or wiping noses. And I would take them for drives in their carriage. I remember Carol Urquhart used to push her sister, her baby sister, around too. We'd go together, like, you know. Oh yeah, the dishes. Oh God. I washed the dishes. My mother used to make porridge and leave the pot in the back of the hot stove till the porridge was so hard that you'd have to use a jackhammer to get it off the bottom. I hated doing the pots. When I was 14, I started making fudge, which I loved to do. And I used to make fudge a lot. Share it with the kids, neighbors. I like making fudge. Started out in the Victoria School in Westville, which is now the town hall, police station. I found school very difficult. Yeah. I didn't have too much help with things like homework because Mom wasn't very patient, I have to say. She wasn't very patient with us to help us with our schoolwork. Yeah, I tried. I was in a few grades twice because I didn't pass. And, of course, when I became 16, I said, this is it. I got my grade 8, and I went to grade 9. I worked at the Aberdeen Hospital for 2 months to get enough money to buy my books to go back to grade 9. I got my books. We had to buy them back then. I didn't finish, so I gave them to Kenny, who was behind me in school. And that's when I went and started working at Mina's Canteen. My uncle Raymond McLeod helped get me the job because she was looking for a waitress. And Raymond must have knew that I wasn't going to school or I was available. So he told her, and then he told me, and I went down and I got interviewed, and she hired me on. Well, every year, of course, we had Christmas, and Mom always cooked a turkey. She'd stay up all night. She'd put that turkey in the oven, and she would sleep on the couch in the kitchen, and she would get up every few hours and baste it, so it would be done by the morning, because it was usually a pretty good-sized turkey with all us kids. And we all had our presents and our stocking full of oranges, apples, grapes, peanuts, things like that. And we each had a toy, not like today having all kinds of stuff, but we each had a toy. I remember a doll that I got. Yeah, she was a beautiful doll. And Dad used to have some friends in to play music in the living room. Some buddies that he knew. They had an accordion and a guitar. And yeah, I remember those nights. We weren't allowed to stay down. We had to go upstairs and go to bed. Just the adults. We listened. Oh, yes, I had grandparents, Archie Heyman and Martha Heyman. I was very close to my grandparents because they lived about 2 houses just below us. And when I was coming home from school, I always went in there first because their house was first. And then I'd go home. And my grandmother always had a rug or a quilt on the quilting frames in the kitchen. They had no TV. Didn't spend time on watching television. They did useful things like making things for beds and the floor, rugs. She made a rug one time like a sailboat. I can remember it yet. The water was blue and the sailboat blue and white sails and the edging was white. My mother used to give her a lot of woolen things that was, she was great at shrinking things. She would put a sweater in the washing machine. It was normal, but it came out like a postage stamp. They were born in Westville. My grandmother was born in Westville, but I heard that Grandpa was supposed to be from Maboo, Britain Way. Grandpa was very kind. He was very nice. He was a good grandfather. Yeah, I liked him very much. He was a nice-looking man, too. I remember the day before they had the McGregor mine explosion, he come over home. He often come over home to visit. And he was bouncing Jerry on his knee, and Jerry was 2. And I remember him bouncing him on his knee. And the next day was the explosion. He was 63 years old, Grandpa, when he died in that McGregor mine disaster in 1952. I was 11 years old. I remember it like yesterday. Yeah. It was very sad. And my grandmother, her and Grandpa used to get into it a lot. I remember one time she hit him over the back with an empty milk bottle. I don't know what the fight was about, but I was there to see that. Like I said, I spent a lot of time with Grandma, and we were doing the dishes one time, and she gave me, they had loose tea way back then. Came in a box, package of loose tea. And so it was a brown ceramic teapot. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I was washing the dishes, but this teapot had some tea leaves in it. And I was trying to get the tea leaves out, and they weren't coming out. So, Grandma said, I always put the leftover tea in my garden. She had some flowers outside underneath the pantry window. So she said, just go out there, Betty, and pour the tea. The tea leaves will come out after you're pouring the leftover tea on the plant. I said, okay. So I went out there and poured it out, and I looked in the teapot. There were still some leaves, the tea leaves, clinging to it inside. So I said, So I whacked it against the house, and the friggin' handle come off. And I took the handle into my grandmother with the other part. She said, Jesus, Betty, what the hell did you do to the teapot? I said, I was trying to get the leaves out of it, but they wouldn't come, so I whacked it against the house. She just laughed. She said, Jesus, Betty, what did you do? She used to take me visiting. Wherever she went, she always asked me, would you like to come with me? And I thought, yeah, I'll go. She was 83 when she died. It was on Rosalind's wedding. When Rosalind and Wayne got married, Rosalind, to my knowledge, put her roses on Grandma's grave. We went to the theater to see the first show of the Titanic. My grandmother wanted to go and see it. So we walked down to the main street, the Drummond Road, where the bus used to go. We used to wait for a bus. Okay. So in the meantime, there'd be some cars coming by, and Grandma, it was cold. I remember that it was cold, and she used to say, if a car would go by and not pick us up, she'd say, oh, I wish his wheels would fall off before he gets down there. I remember her saying that because, so finally we got to the theater, the Jubilee Theater in Stellarton. That's where it was showing. And David Niven and Barbara Stanwyck were the main actress in that movie, the first one that was out. And I remember sitting beside Grandma, and when the boat was sinking, my grandmother belonged to the Salvation Army in Westville. In fact, her father was the first captain in Westville of the Salvation Army, Tom McCune. And when the Salvation Army people got on the main floor of the boat, of the ship, or the Titanic, they started to sing, Near Thy God to Me. And my
Okay.
And I looked up at my grandmother, and there was tears running down her cheeks. I'll never forget that. And it was very sad, of course. The sinking of the Titanic was very sad. But I remember that. And then when we got home, we got off the bus, and at that time there was a hedge. There was a hedge on each side of the walk from the high school down to Drummond Road. There was a hedge. And my grandmother had to go to the bathroom. So she sat down and she squatted. And she peed right there on the side of the road, on the side of the hedge. She couldn't wait to get home. And then when we did get home, I went in the house with her, of course. And she was taking off her corset. And she said, oh my God, she said, what a relief. And she stood there. Oh God. She was funny. I'll never forget that. Now I look at my body and say, oh my God, I got my grandmother's body right here, because her skin hung down just like mine does. I wanted to be a farmer's wife when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a farmer's wife. Oh, I know why I thought like that. My grandmother had a family that she knew out in Middle River. They were in Middle River. The house is still there today, and every time I go by, the memory of being in that house with my grandmother, visiting, Wally Graham, Mrs. Wally Graham, she had little chickens in a box in her kitchen on the floor by the stove. They were on a farm. And I saw these little chickens, little yellow chickens, and I said, I'm going to do that. That's what I want. I met Johnny while I was doing some cleaning for his mother down on Park Street, because he lived with his mother. And he'd come down around 3 o'clock to get ready to go to work at the Maritime Steel, because he had the cattle up in Hopewell. And he always went up there in the morning to feed them and water them, do whatever. But he made sure he came back in time. So he came back in, and he was having his meal at the table. She always had his meal ready for him. And I was sitting there on the kitchen chair, and I remember that I had on a green-colored halter top and a pair of shorts. It was summertime when I first met him. It was warm. And he walked by me to go to the sink for something, and he squeezed my knee, just like that. Nobody ever did that in their life to me, squeeze my knee, and I thought, gee, that's different. So Mrs. Sturt said, this is my son Johnny. So I said, hello. Yeah, he was a very clean-looking man, very clean. We got married in Halifax, at one of the brothers' home, one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And we didn't get married until 11 o'clock at night because he was out on a Bible study and he didn't get back home for a while. So finally we got married. And then after that we drove to the nearest restaurant because I think we were both hungry. And I got scallops and French fries. That was our wedding supper. We had an Austin car. We drove up to Halifax on a Saturday. We got married on a Saturday, October the 8th. It'll be 58 years next month. It was a beautiful drive, a beautiful sunny Saturday. The leaves were colored and it was gorgeous. But it was a very cold night. I don't even think there was heat in the Austin. So I had a puff or a big blanket wrapped around me. I was wearing a blue suit, a blue skirt and jacket and white blouse. I remember that. That same night we drove home from Halifax right to the farm. It was far. I was near froze. So Johnny put a fire on. At least we had a stove in the house. He put a fire on and we sat by the stove to get warmed up. See, we eloped because Mrs. Stewart wouldn't hear tell of it, and my father either. So we eloped. It was better to do that. The age difference was a big thing. And besides Mrs. Stewart's son, Johnny, she figured she'd always have him with her for the rest of her life. But he needed to have a life too, you know. John and I had 2 sons, Bill and Dan. March 30th for Dan, the baby, and April 3rd for Bill, the oldest. He's 55 and Danny's 50 now. When we were on the farm, just before Danny was born, I think Bill would be about 4 because he was 5 when Danny was born. I don't know, things were going on, maybe I was upset about something, and I said one time, "I'm going crazy." And Bill says, "Oh, Mom, can I come too? Do I need my coat?" Bill always loved animals and birds, so coming home from school one day in May, he climbed up to a tall tree that had a nest of crows. He came home with the 2 crows, cuddled in his sweater. All they had on, the crows, was just a fuzz. Just a fuzz. We named them Jimmy and Joey. Joey was called after Joey Smallwood, the premier of Prince Edward Island, because he looked like him. I hope you don't hear that, because he's long dead. Well, we raised them in a box in the kitchen, on top of the refrigerator in the kitchen, and gave them liver. Every day we had liver from the cattle, because Johnny butchered our own cattle. And then they started getting all their feathers and everything, and getting bigger. And put them outside because they were born in May, so by now it would be June. And of course the assembly came in July. I couldn't find a crow sitter, so I took them with me to the island in an old Sobeys cart wagon that you put groceries in. I got one of those, put a cover on it and all that stuff. We took enough liver with us to go to Prince Edward Island. Got them on the boat and the whole bit. We had a van, a blue van, and the crows were there. So we had them. And when we got to the assembly, we'd let them out and they'd fly around, and one of them landed on one of the brothers' heads while I was talking to him. The crow was landing on his head, and I said, one of the crows is on your head. Oh, he said, "That's all right, it's not going to bother me." But I thought it might poop, and I thought, oh, that'd be great. These stories I have about the animals is written down because there was plenty. Bill was always taking things home. Raccoons, fox. We had a skunk named Pansy. I wanted to have a baby more than anything else in the whole wide world. Oh, heavens. The doctor said he never saw anybody as excited as I was when I had Bill. Oh, yeah. I remember saying, "Oh, my own baby. He's my own baby, my own, and nobody's going to take him from me." I think the hardest part was sending them to school. They had to walk down the whole lane. There was no school bus. They walked down to get the bus. And Bill walked down to the school in Eureka. Yeah, the school was down in Eureka. We lived at the top of the hill on Horton's Road, they called it. John used to say it was 9/10 of a mile up the hill. A dirt road, of course. Each side, trees all along up the hill until we got to past the gate. Then there was no trees, immediate trees, yeah. All minis in winter, we walked up those hills, coming home from the meeting. My right cheek would be frozen because it would be coming from the north, the wind. And John would have Bill, or I'd have Bill by my hand, and he'd have Danny across his shoulder, carrying him up the hill, because we couldn't make it up with the car because it'd be too much snow. I became involved with Jehovah's Witnesses when I was about 14. It was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, Elner Kosh, who showed me from the Bible Jehovah's name. I never knew it. It was Jesus to me, was always God, as we're taught in church. And she showed me from Psalms 83 and 18. His name was Jehovah. So that's when I became involved, and I started going to the meetings. And then Johnny and his mother would start going to the meetings. So it started there, 64 years ago. I look like my mother, and anybody that knows and saw my mother at her age as I'm getting on, I look just like what she did at my age. I got his hair. My father had lovely wavy hair. I always believed in this scripture, and I try to do it. Do unto others as you want them to do unto you. And if everybody did that, we'd have a better world. It isn't good to hurt somebody, because it hurts. I love to paint, I love to cook, I love to garden. I love being around dogs, as you know. I love dogs. I never make a promise unless I can keep it. If I don't think I can keep a promise, I won't make a promise. We all have bad qualities. What's a bad quality that I have? I'm not perfect, I know that. I love working in the garden. Is that a talent? I get the weeds under control, I work at it, and to me, my flowers are my friends. I hate putting a hose on my garden. I have watering cans, and I'd rather do that than put a hose on them. You don't put a hose on your friends. Yeah, and I hate coming in at night. When I was living over in Park Street, I used to go around and talk to all my plants. And I'd say, okay, it's getting dark now. I gotta go in, but I'll see you in the morning. Because I'd stay out till it was dark. In the summer, it doesn't get dark till 9 o'clock or 9:30. And I like to share. If I have things, I like to share. If I bake something, I'll take it to my neighbors, or make fudge, take it to my neighbors. They used to say that the biggest room in the world is room for improvement. And when we went to the farm, it was an old hay field in front of the house. An old hay field. So I started with a lawnmower. I'd have to hold it up so I could do some of the cutting before it would get clogged up. It was so thick. But I finally did it. And I got it down to a lawn. Every time I cut it, it would be nice. Just cut the lawn. I used to see people with lots of flowers around their place, and I'd say to myself, I'd love to have that. I'd love to have that in my place. And then I said to myself, well, why say it? Why not do it? So that's when I started. And I got a lot of plants from Mrs. Euclobolotis, the phlox. And I put a whole row of phlox around the front of my lawn on each side. And every year I would separate them until there was phlox all around. And then a rose hedge was first. I put the rose hedge in first years ago. I bought a package of seeds for 80 cents from the Dominion Seed House. I started the seeds in a bucket, a tub. And when they got to be a foot high, I hired old Bob Lowry to dig a trench all around the front of where the farm was, the house. He did that. And when it came time, we filled the trench with manure because we had plenty of it with the cows, and then planted these hedge. And they all took, and the hedge was 8 to 10 feet high. And the reason I sent for that package, because it said in the advertising, guaranteed to keep out the strongest bull. I said, that's exactly what I need, because I was always making individual plots for my flowers, and the bulls would get out and the cows and come in and destroy it. So I said, that's what I need. So I did it. And they never got through that fence. It was so thorny. We did everything together. When we were first married, it was a shambles. It was an old vacant farmhouse. It had been vacant for 10 years. My favorite movie was called Giant. It was about the oil fields in Texas, and it was Elizabeth Taylor. And I love Lucy. Oh my gosh, the long, long trailer. That made me laugh. Lucille Ball made me laugh more than anything. The things that give me most pleasure now are being able to work in my garden when spring comes, and living in this home, which I'm very contented. I love it. And my neighbors. I get along good with all my 10 lady friends right here. I'm living in a senior citizens home, apartment, I should say, senior citizens apartment, Porter's Lane in Westville, phase 2, number 2. All you gotta do is think about going to the toilet, and you can't miss mine. I love to whistle. I lived on a farm where I could whistle my head off, and nobody would tell me to shut up, because it didn't matter. There was no neighbors. When John and I first got married, Sam Horton was our only neighbor, and he lived way down the road. There's a long, long trail a-winding. Okay, what's that? If I can. Oh, wait now. I'll whistle the song, if I can think of it, that Dottie White used to love. Smile a while and kiss me sad adieu. When the clouds roll by, I'll come to you. La da 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 dee da da. Down in Lover's Lane, my dearie. Da 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 dum da dee da 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 dum da da dum da dee da dum. Oh, till we meet again. Now, I have that written down, I'm sure. In my 20s, I was married. I got married at 19, so I'd be married a year when I was 20. Living on the farm, working on the farm. I made the commitment when I got married that I was going to be married. Try to do my best being a good housekeeper and keeping the family together. When I was in my 50s, I was working for Barb Duggan. Yeah, I went out to take care of Barb. Housekeeping, the whole thing, taking care, cooking, baking. Got my driver's license when I was 50. Although Johnny taught me to drive when I was 16. A standard car called a Studebaker, which we took your mother home from the hospital in. John and I drove down to the hospital to get Mama and Beverly the day she was coming home. And so the nurse came out of the hospital. It was it the Aberdeen or the old hospital? I think your mother was born in the older hospital. And the nurse was taking her downstairs, and her mom was already in the car sitting beside John. He was driving. I was in the back seat. And the nurse passed Mom the baby, your mother. And Johnny said, "Well, now, Vi, we can go on our honeymoon." You know what Mom said? My God, I hope the nurse doesn't think he was my husband. Oh, that was so funny. I remember that like yesterday. In my 60s, I lived in Park Street. We left the farm in 1995, because John was sick, and we couldn't get a taxi or an ambulance up that hill because it was so icy. So that's when we decided to move into Park Street, because the house was already left to Johnny from his mother. So there wasn't much for me to do when we moved in. It was very nice. And I loved it. I always loved that little house. And the first time I ever met it, I knew about it. So we were there until 9 years. And that's where my mother passed away. Took care of Mom. Yeah. I promised her that years before that I would take care of her. I would never want her to go to a home. Not that I'm against the home, but I don't think I could put her in the home and then say, see you later, Mom. But it happens. It's going on now. A lot of people in the home hardly ever get a visit from anybody. It's very sad. I took care of John and Mom. They used to play cards. Mom used to come down. Before she came to live with me, she would come down and her and John would play cards. Rummy. They loved it. I have Mom and John on video. And Mom was singing a song. I got her to sing a song. Springtime in the Rockies. That's a pretty song. Johnny died. It'll be 19 years, November the 27th, 1997. Mama died in 1999, 2 years after John, I think. After Johnny passed away, Mom came down and stayed with me. Well, I can't believe I'll be 78 in March. And just 2 years later, I'll be 80. I can't even believe that. I mean, when I was a kid, 80 was an old person. I don't feel like an old person in my mind. I mean, my body's sore and whatnot, and I'm having trouble with my heart, and my legs hurt, and this. Well, I won't go on. You can't stop aging. I think I'd like to go back to when I was about 18 or so, 16 or so, when I fell in love with John. That was a wonderful time. Because I was in love, and I loved the feeling. I don't regret taking care of John. I don't regret taking care of my mother. I don't have any regrets that I can think of, really. I don't have any grandchildren. I have my sister's children, and I'm very fond of, and I could pretend they're mine, my grandchildren. Up at the farm, I had a secret spot that I'd go to if I thought things were, bothering me or whatever. I'd go over, and there was a brook. And I took an old rug and I'd put the rug down and I would sit there and just listen to the water trickling over the moss-covered rocks as they trickled down the hill. And on the way over, I took an axe one day and I cut limbs off of the trees as I was walking in so they wouldn't hit my head. I cut them just high enough that I could walk without them hitting me. And I put some colored rocks. I took them over to there. And one day I hung a little corduroy slipper that you'd buy for a little native doll. I hung them on the tree. And even Hurricane Ron didn't blow them off. They were still there after that. And I used to sit there and just enjoy myself. Quiet, peaceful, all things that God gave us to make it peaceful. And the smell of the spruce, especially after a rain, was beautiful. But that was my favorite spot to go to. I started writing poems in 1976. That's the oldest one I have. And it was about walking down the lane in the wintertime. And I liked all the things that God made, so I would write about it. I wrote different poems. Your future lies before you like a field of driven snow. Be careful how you walk on it, for every step will show. Here is the story of the pink peony poppy. It was a lonely poppy growing in an empty lumberyard in New Brunswick, where Bill was working, my son Bill. He spotted it there growing among old pieces of wood and ashes. He carefully dug it up, not knowing what type of flower it was. He carefully took it to his home and transplanted it. With time and patience, he watched it continue to grow and produce a beautiful peony pink poppy. He took a picture, and I recognized it as a pink peony poppy. Right away I said, "Oh, Bill, save me some seeds." So he did. Dried them all winter in a brown paper bag, and in this spring I just scattered them where they are now. And lo and behold, they grew with Jehovah's help, and now they are just beautiful in my back garden. Starting in New Brunswick, to hear. I'm so happy that Bill has the good quality to care for God's creation, to dig up the lonely poppy, so that now many are there and it's not lonely anymore. There. That's the story. Oh, look, I know I have that there here. I'm going to find it before the day is out. No? Oh, well, I guess I'll have to give up that idea. Oh, I got lots of other poems. Just up in the cupboard there, in a brown envelope, yeah. I like writing poems because I try to rhyme them. I try that they'll rhyme. I find that's why I do it, because they come so easy. Hello, Beverly. Finally got you. You're not a machine. Well, I have Jan here with me. I'll call you later. Okay. Bye-bye. When I was expecting Bill, I was quite big. He weighed 9 pounds at birth. And I went over to my grandmother's. And she looked at me and she says, you know, Betty, they're no trouble as long as they're in there. She must have been speaking from experience, because Grandma had 6, I think, 2 girls and the boys, and she lost a little girl, Mary. If a young person came to me looking for advice, I would just advise them to be kind and generous and not to be critical. Try to encourage them as much as you can, because when you encourage somebody, it makes them feel that they want to go on and do better in their life. Be positive. There's too much negativity. A successful life is to be able to live and enjoy each day. Getting up in the morning, like I have a saying, it's like this: thank you, Jehovah, for this day. Don't let me lay in bed and waste it away. So I get up. A day for me is like this. First, I get out of bed. Then I get washed. I go out and turn the kettle on. If it's cold, I turn the heat up. I open my curtains. I look out and thank God for my eyesight, that I can see His creation everywhere around me. And then I might decide what I'm going to have for my lunch. I make a sandwich. Or I might have a visitor, or there might be someone on the phone, or I'll call somebody. And then, of course, make my bed. Gotta do that. And just do stuff. If I have to do laundry, I do it. If I have to go up to the store, thank God for my car, that I have a car to do these things. And I have a lot of appointments lately, so I do those. And if anybody needs anything, I'll ask them. And every other day I feed the birds down in Campbell's Road, because we're not allowed to feed them here. I go to Gino's in Stellarton and I buy my bread for 50 cents a loaf. Oh, hi, Trina. Not too bad, dear. Thank you. Yes, well, they called and said that I was to keep continuing to go every 2 weeks. Oh, yes, I'm home now. Yeah. Thank you very much, Trina. Thank you. Bye. Yes, and then, of course, I prepare supper. And oh, yes, I like to do my word puzzle. It passes the time. And because I don't do any inside hobbies like knitting, crocheting, or anything like some of my neighbors do, but I never get into that. My hobby is outside, my gardening. I go to bed at 9 o'clock. I've never judged. I'm not a judge. Whatever people do, they do because they're the way they are.
Do you want to get bacon?
Right now? Oh, sure. We got everything there. We're going to make oatmeal chocolate chip cookies. Let's get bacon. Well, I like to do it in this because it has depth. Deep. You can stir like crazy. Then I have to get my spoon. This is my 25-year-old spoon. Yeah, it baked more. It made more buns and bread and pickles. That's why it's stained, for the pickles. I got it at a yard sale for 50 cents. 25 years ago, Dottie White and I were at the hall, and there was a yard sale going on up by the drive-in theater outside Westville. She said, let's go up. I said, okay. The only thing I found and would like was this spoon, and it's still with me. So there. Now first we put the butter in. Always have your butter soft. It's easier to work at. Throw in the you put in the sugar. I'm going to have brown sugar. And you have to cream it. They call it creaming. Cream your butter. And you can pass me the vanilla from that cupboard, please. On the left side. It's pure vanilla from Mexico. Calls for a teaspoon of vanilla. So let's get the teaspoon going. When you use the article, you put it back so you remember that you already used it. And you can bring me out the soda and the salt, please. Yeah. There you go. That's the stuff. Yeah. You can pass me the flour too, please. Whole wheat. I bought it at Giant Tiger because it's cheaper, but it's the same thing.
Okay.
No, this is getting to be pretty good. I got my mother's recipe for a plain cake. I'm going to share it with Danny because he said he wanted to make a cake. You can use your fingers as long as they're clean. What next? 2 eggs. For the first time in my life, would you believe it? I've been married for 58 years. I bought myself a whisk. I never ever had one on the farm. There.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, that's all right. There. Yeah. And I said, my soul, how did I ever live without a whisk? No, egg whites, yes, I heard that it's good for your complexion.
Yeah.
You leave it on for a while, and it does feel like your face is dry, but then you wash it off. I'm just going to kind of break this up. I'm beating 2 eggs with the whisk. I'm putting the egg into the sugar mixture. Now I take the spoon and go at it again. You mix it till it's kind of smooth, like nice. I know when you're making bread, you do it and do it and do it. The more you knead it, the better it is. There'll be less holes in your bread. Wait till I take the rest off here. I don't want anything to go to waste.
What's your favorite recipe of all time?
I don't. The Queen Elizabeth squares. They're very nice. Like those. And making boiled frosting is nice. 1.5 cups of whole wheat flour. Is that what that says?
Yeah.
Yeah, 1.5. Good. Okay, come here, flour. 1.5 cups. There's one right up to there.
Okay.
Too much? Yeah. I'd say that's all right. 1 soda and half a salt. Oh, cinnamon. Never measure your stuff over your stuff. Never measure your spices over.
I can see why you go by that rule.
Yeah, never measure it over here. Okay. Now, cream, margarine, or butter. Add sugar, which we did. Beat egg, we did. And vanilla, we did. Add sifted dry stuff, which we're going to do. Yeah, the oats is next, and the chocolate chip, which I have them all measured on top of the microwave. Julia Childs.
Julia
Childs. Yes, she was my favorite to listen to.
Really?
Julia Childs, yes. Yes, I love watching her cooking. I got a hint from her, and it works. When you're making stew with your pieces of beef, cut them up in hunks. Cook them till they're kind of nice on each side, and butter. Cook them in butter, of course. She was a butter person. Yeah, cook them till they're nice, and then put them in your boiled dinner with the water and everything, and it makes a lovely gravy too. Braising, that's the word I couldn't find. The kitchen is the cruelest place to be. You beat the eggs, you whip the cream, and you slice the cheese. Okay, now, these cookies are going to be really good. Now we're putting in the oats. We're putting in 2.5 cups of oats. Rolled oats. Here we go, boy. Yeah. I'm walking through the snow with my boots on. That's what it sounds like. I'm walking through the snow with my boots on.
Or what is it?
Oh, yes. Cornstarch. Sound effects is right. Oh, yeah. When you get a box of chocolates, and that black thing that the chocolates are sitting in, you wrinkle it and close your eyes, and you think you're in a forest fire. Oh, they're a good, healthy cookie. Now we can throw in the chocolate chips. Put in the chocolate chips last.
Okay. Why is that?
Because that's what the recipe says. Hear that? Raindrops. Remember what John Wayne said?
What?
When you're gardening, you can have the most expensive fertilizer that you could ever buy. But there's one ingredient. If you don't use it, your garden will not become of anything. And what is that ingredient?
What?
Sweat. If you don't sweat, it'll not come to anything. You got to work. That's what it means, work. You have to work in a garden.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen by itself. Okay, first of all, we put a cup of butter in the dish, 1.5 cups of brown sugar, and we mix it all around with the vanilla, and then 1.5 cups of, 2 beaten eggs. 2 beaten eggs. And after that's all smooth, whatever, you add 1.5 cups of whole wheat flour, 1 teaspoon of soda, half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of cinnamon. Mix that all in. And after that, you put in 2.5 cups of rolled oats and your 8 ounce or a cup of chocolate chip. So it's all done. It's all done. All we have to do now is form the cookies and put them on this cookie sheet and put them in the oven at 350. You did that good, Jen.
Oh, good. Thanks.
I like to try to get them evenly if I can. Did you ever see one of these? My neighbor gave it to me. It's the best thing she ever gave me.
Oh, is it for opening jars?
Good heavens, yes. Pop bottles, any jar. It works. Mike was very smart because when I had my first car, when it rained, I had trouble getting it started. So he lifted up the hood and he said, my distributor caps, the wires from my distributor were wet. And so he said, he put some tape on, but he said, this is just like a Band-Aid. He said, you'll have to go and get a new distributor. What did I have to drink that I can't even say it right?
Try one more time.
Distributor cap. They look lovely and very, very nice. He did a good job.
Thanks.
They're almost identical to each other. After we put them in the pan, try to get them the same size. Then they go in the oven at 350. So we're ready to do that now. We got more than we need, so we have to put the pan in and then wait, and then put these in when they come out. Okay, let's put them in. Then we could sit down and maybe make a cup of tea. Okay, now do your thing. Cookies? It's 1:30. When you begin to smell them, look at them. When you begin to smell them, look. I'd like to read you some of my poems I wrote over the years. Snowflakes gently falling upon the sleeping trees. No direction or destiny, just falling where they please. Blown about by every breeze. Undisturbed by man or beast. Covering the earth below with a silent blanket of lily white snow. 1976, this is when I first started. Poem by Betty Stewart, February 10th, 76. Let's go for an adventurous walk down a picturesque country road. Let's gaze at all the trees with their heads bowed low from the weight of the new fallen snow that perched on their tired limbs like light fluffy clouds, and the tall spruce trees that stood like majesties in a crowd, seeming to say, look up, look at me. Oh, what joy one can find, if only for a moment, to just leave this old world behind and lose oneself in the simple freeness of nature's birch, spruce, and pine. That's the first one. I was going down the road, getting down by Agders. Snowflake, and mostly these are from winter. Snowflakes gently falling upon the pine tree cones. Birds merrily chirping, flitting around. The seed-filled feeders below, enjoying each morsel as it comes their way, chirping, singing as if to say, hooray, hooray, we live to enjoy this another great day. We should follow their example, put our woes and worries far away, so we too can shout, hooray, hooray, I'm going to enjoy this another new day. Oh yeah, you probably know who this is I'm speaking about, or what. Unannounced and silent, she enters the room, so quiet, you'd think that nothing was there. Softly she makes her way through. What do you think I'm talking about? Why, no other than the cushiony paws of my cat Blue. Remember Blue? Oh. If you love me as I love you, no one can cut our love in two. The fox loves the valley, the deer loves the hill. I love you dearly and always will. The days will pass, our good times end, but I'll still be happy if I can call you friend. Will you? Love, Betty Stewart. As we start out this year, I put 2014, but I wrote this 4 years ago. As we start out this year, 2018, I pray that things will go better for you and for me. Our destiny is not in our hands alone. Our future is certainly unknown. We can have a good start if we give from the heart. Only time can tell if we fare badly or well. So I faithfully pray that kindness and goodness will follow us each and every day. When I get old and cannot see, please hold the pot so I can pee. A farting horse. Oh yeah. Wait, no. Oh, there's a man to hire. Oh, can't get it right. A farting man. A farting horse will never tire, and a farting man is the man to hire. Until snow falls in Kentucky on a hot day in July, till hound dogs don't bark anymore, when daisies turn to roses and roses turn to thorns, I'll be loving you only. Love, Betty Stewart. Danny, if I had a penny for every time I thought of you, there'd be no room to swim in the ocean blue, because it would be filled with thoughts of you.